This is my true story. I went to the bank today because something felt wrong. They told me someone tried to access my account, using my information, my PIN, everything. I felt my stomach twist. I kept thinking, who would do this to me? I went back home early, shaken and scared, not knowing what I was about to walk into. And when I opened my kitchen door, I heard my son whisper something that made my whole body freeze. What I saw on that table nearly took my breath away. Before I continue, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is. And please subscribe so my stories can reach more people. I walked out of the bank feeling like the ground under me wasn't steady anymore. The air felt heavy around me, and every step I took felt slow and unsure. My hands were trembling, and I had to press them against my bag just to keep them still. I couldn't believe what the banker told me. Someone had tried to get into my account that morning. Someone had used my information, my details, my PIN, all the things only people close to me would know. The moment he said it, something inside me dropped. It felt like a quiet alarm ringing somewhere deep in my chest. The banker looked at me with concern, and that made it even worse. He asked if I lived with anyone. He asked if anyone helped me with finances. He asked questions that made my heart beat faster because he said them gently, like he already knew the truth I didn't want to face. When he printed the alert notice and handed it to me, he lowered his voice and told me to be careful at home. Those were his exact words. Be careful at home. I nodded, but my throat was tight and I couldn't speak. I folded the paper slowly, slipping it into my bag as if hiding it would make the fear go away. But it didn't. Nothing made it go away. Not the air outside, not the sunlight, not the movement of people around me. I walked out of the building with my body tense, feeling like someone had reached into my life and touched something they shouldn't have, something private, something I depended on. I kept thinking about every small moment when something felt off in the house, moments I brushed away because I didn't want to believe my own thoughts. Now all those moments rushed back at once, crowding my mind until I felt dizzy. I stood at the curb and waved for a taxi, hoping no one would notice how shaken I was. When I sat inside, I leaned back in the seat, closing my eyes for a moment to steady myself. But the words wouldn't leave me. Someone tried to access your account. Someone used your information. Someone knew too much. I tried to breathe slowly, but even that felt difficult. My chest felt tight, and every small sound made me jump a little. The banker's words kept repeating in my mind, "Be careful at home." I didn't want to believe it meant anything serious. I didn't want to think anything bad. I didn't want to imagine that someone close to me could do something like this, but the fear was too strong now. It sat in my stomach, heavy and cold. The taxi ride felt longer than usual. I looked out the window the whole time, trying to hold myself together, trying to understand what was happening, trying not to let my mind go to the worst place. But it kept going there anyway. When the taxi turned onto my street, my heart started beating even faster. I wasn't ready to go home. I wasn't ready to face anything. I needed time to think, but I had none. The taxi slowed down in front of my house, and I sat there for a moment, gripping the door handle, unable to move. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself maybe it was an error. I told myself maybe the bank got it wrong. But deep inside, something whispered that it wasn't wrong. Something whispered that the truth was waiting for me inside that house. I paid the driver with shaky hands and stepped out slowly. I stood at the bottom of the steps, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on me. I walked toward the door, telling myself to stay calm. But my heart knew. My heart already knew something was deeply wrong. And I was about to walk right into it. I opened my front door slowly, still shaken from what the bank had told me. I stepped inside with careful steps, almost afraid of the air in my own home. I wasn't supposed to be back this early, and that thought alone made my heart beat faster. I closed the door gently behind me, trying not to make any noise. I didn't want anyone to hear me. I didn't want anyone to know I was home yet. I didn't know why I felt that way, but something deep inside me told me to stay quiet. The house felt different the moment I walked in. It didn't feel warm. It didn't feel familiar. It felt tense, like the walls themselves were holding something they didn't want me to know. I set my bag down slowly and listened. At first, I didn't hear anything, just silence. Then I heard the low sound of voices, soft, close, coming from the kitchen. I stopped moving immediately. My breath caught in my chest. It was my son's voice. Low, steady, serious, not his normal tone, not the tone he used when he joked or chatted. This was different. It made my stomach twist. Then I heard his wife speak too, her voice softer but carrying a strange tone I couldn't place. Something secretive, something that made my skin prickle. I stood in the hallway, frozen, listening to the rise and fall of their quiet conversation. I couldn't hear the words yet, only the tones. But even the tones made my heart pound faster. I took a few careful steps toward the kitchen, making sure each step was silent. I didn't want to interrupt anything. I didn't want to alert them. I just needed to understand what was happening. The closer I got, the clearer their voices became. Not the words, just the sound of them. Fast little whispers, short breaths. The kind of conversation people have when they don't want anyone else to hear. I felt a cold wave move through me. The warning from the bank came back all at once. Someone tried to access your account. Someone used your PIN. Someone used your details. My mind didn't want to connect the pieces. My heart didn't want to believe anything bad, but the voices in the kitchen wouldn't let me feel calm. They pushed the truth closer. They made me listen harder. I stopped right before the kitchen doorway. I pressed my hand against the wall to steady myself. My fingers were shaking. My legs felt weak. I didn't know what I was about to hear, but something inside me whispered that I needed to be careful. I leaned forward just a little, slowly, silently, the way someone moves when they're afraid of what's on the other side. I could hear their voices clearly now, but I still couldn't make out the exact words. Only the tone, a tone that wasn't meant for me. I didn't want to listen. I didn't want to eavesdrop. I didn't want to think my own child could be part of anything harmful. But the banker's warning kept echoing in my head. Be careful at home. At home. Here. This place. With the people I trusted. I stayed still, trying to settle my breathing. My heart felt like it was beating in my throat, every beat louder than the one before. I wishing I had taken a moment outside to gather myself. I wished I had prepared for whatever I was about to walk into. I wished everything I felt was just a mistake, a misunderstanding, an exaggeration from my frightened mind. But the longer I stood there in the hallway, the more I felt the truth growing around me like a shadow. The truth that something was happening in my house. Something planned, something quiet, something I was not supposed to hear. I slid one foot slightly closer, just enough to place me right at the edge of the doorway. I wasn't ready to look inside. Not yet. I just needed to hear one word, one clue, one sound that told me whether the fear in my chest was real or just my imagination. The tension in the air was thick, too thick. It felt like the house was holding its breath with me, as if even the walls were waiting for the next thing my son would say. And I stood there, still as stone, heart shaking inside me, knowing that whatever I was about to hear would change everything. I reached my hand toward the kitchen door, moving slowly so it wouldn't creak. My fingers touched the wood, and for a moment I just stayed there, afraid to push it open even an inch. My heart was beating too hard. My breath was too shaky. I felt like the smallest sound might give me away. Then, right as I was about to take a step forward, I heard his voice, clear, low, sharp enough to freeze every part of me. My son, my own son. His words cut straight through the silence like a blade. She'll never know. It's perfect timing. The moment he said it, my whole body went cold. It felt like someone poured ice water down my back. Those words weren't casual. They weren't harmless. They weren't spoken like a joke. They carried meaning, intent, a plan. His wife made a soft giggle right after, a quiet, excited little sound that made my stomach twist even tighter. It wasn't nervous, it wasn't confused. It sounded like she was enjoying whatever they were discussing, enjoying it, as if something good were about to happen, for them, and something bad, for me. I felt my knees weaken. I had to press my back against the wall to keep myself steady. My hands were shaking so much I had to grip the edge of the doorway just to keep them from trembling openly. I didn't understand everything yet, but that one sentence told me enough. Something was happening behind my back. Something planned. Something secret. Something I was never supposed to hear. I leaned in just a little more, my heart rising into my throat. My ears felt sharper, desperate to catch their next words, but for a moment, they said nothing. Just the soft sounds of papers being moved on the table, the slide of something across the wood, small breaths, then low whispers again. I didn't dare move. I didn't dare breathe too loudly. Every part of me felt frozen in place. I wished I had never come home early. I wished I had never heard that sentence. I wished everything I feared wasn't true, but there it was, spoken by my own son in my own house. She'll never know. Who was he talking about? Me. There was no mistaking that. It's perfect timing. Perfect timing for what? For who? Certainly not for me. Each word circled inside my mind over and over, building a pressure in my chest so heavy I thought I might collapse. The warning from the bank connected in an instant with the whispers in my kitchen. The fear I felt earlier returned 10 times stronger. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to steady my breath. I felt tears burning behind my eyelids, but I didn't let them fall. I couldn't. Not yet. Not while I stood in the hallway listening to my own child plotting something I didn't understand. When I opened my eyes again, the kitchen light spilled faintly through the crack of the door. I could see their shadows moving, leaning in, looking down at something, planning around it. They didn't sound rushed. They didn't sound stressed. They sounded ready. I felt a deep ache settle in my chest, the kind of ache that comes when trust begins to crack, slow and painful under the weight of something you never imagined. His wife whispered something I couldn't fully make out, but the tone said enough. It was encouragement, agreement, approval. Whatever they were doing, she wasn't just involved. She was supporting it, helping it, guiding it. I wanted to walk away. I wanted to leave the house right then, but my feet wouldn't move. I needed to know what it was, what perfect timing meant, what they were planning so quietly in the kitchen. My son whispered again, even lower this time, as if sharing a final detail. I leaned in just a little more, holding my breath completely. And then I saw it. A paper sliding across the table under his hand. Something important. Something official. Something meant for me. I didn't know what it was yet, but I knew one thing. Whatever they were planning, it involved me signing something I would never sign. And that thought alone made my whole body tremble. I pushed the kitchen door open just a little, only enough to let a sliver of light touch my face. I stayed behind it, hidden, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure they could hear it through the walls. I tried to steady my breathing, but every inhale felt sharp. Every exhale felt shaky. My body didn't feel like mine. My legs were weak. My hands were trembling. Something inside me knew I was about to see something I wasn't supposed to see. I kept one hand on the door, using it to hold myself upright. I was afraid to push it farther, afraid the hinges might make a sound, but I needed to see. I needed to know. My fear of the truth was fighting against my need to understand, and that battle made my whole body tense. The kitchen lights were bright, much brighter than the rest of the house. They spread across the tiled floor, across the table, across the two people sitting there like they had been waiting for something. My son sat on one side, his shoulders leaned forward. His wife sat across from him, her elbows on the table, her eyes fixed on the papers in front of them. Neither of them looked like they were having a casual conversation. Their bodies were tight, focused, determined. They still didn't see me. They were too busy, too focused on what they were doing, too deep in whatever secret they were preparing. My stomach twisted as I watched them from behind the door, hidden because I couldn't bring myself to step fully inside. My breath got stuck in my throat. I could hear my own heartbeat thudding in my ears. I felt like the whole room was pressing down on me. The banker's warning echoed again in my mind, stronger now, clearer. He told me to be careful. He told me something didn't look right. And now, standing behind that door, I felt the truth creeping closer with every second. My son leaned over the table, pointing at a line on the document. His wife nodded, her face serious. They weren't joking. They weren't planning something harmless. Their faces showed concentration and something else too. Anticipation, as if they were preparing for a moment they both had been waiting for. I swallowed hard, my throat tight with fear. I took one slow step forward, just enough to keep the door from swinging shut behind me. The small movement made the floor shift under my feet, and for a moment, I thought the sound might give me away. But they didn't react. They were too absorbed in their plan. I stared at the table, at the papers spread out across the wood. There were several sheets, white, clean, printed with long lines and paragraphs. Some had little sticky notes on them, some had highlighted sections. Some had bold words across the top. It didn't look like normal mail. It didn't look like anything simple. My pulse quickened. I felt heat climb up my face, even though the room itself felt cold. I tried to brace myself, gripping the edge of the door, tighter, my fingers tense and stiff. I wasn't ready to face them, not yet, but I needed to see what they were doing. My eyes scanned the table again. They moved around the papers, flipping one over, carefully, straightening another. They worked like people handling something important, something that needed to be perfect before someone else saw it. The fear inside me grew heavier, like a stone pressing against my chest. Everything inside me told me to turn around, to walk away, to pretend I hadn't come home early, but my feet wouldn't move backward. They kept me planted behind that door, watching, listening, trembling. I leaned forward just a little more, careful, slow, quiet. My eyes caught a glimpse of my son's hand moving across the table. He pushed something toward his wife again, another paper, another step in whatever they were planning. I felt my breath shorten. My knees almost buckled. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't random. This wasn't a misunderstanding. They were preparing something official, something meant for me. I stood there behind the door, my whole body shaking, knowing I was only seconds away from seeing the truth I had been afraid of since leaving the bank. And once I saw it, nothing would be the same again. I leaned in just a little more, my fingers tightening on the edge of the door, because I needed to see what he had pushed across the table. My heart was pounding so hard, it felt like it was shaking my whole chest. I wasn't ready. I wasn't prepared. But my eyes moved anyway, drawn to the papers like they were pulling me forward. My son's hand rested on the document for a moment, almost proudly, like he was showing off something important. Then he slid it gently toward his wife, the paper gliding across the wooden table so quietly it felt unreal. The lighting in the kitchen hit the top of the page just right, and suddenly I could see the bold letters printed across the top. My breath stopped. My whole body went still. Beneficiary change in joint account authorization. I knew those words. I recognized them from the bank forms I had filled out years ago. They were not harmless papers. They were not something simple. They were documents that gave someone else access to everything I had. My savings, my retirement, my account, my future, and there it was. My name. Printed neatly at the top of the form, staring back at me like a warning, like a threat. My eyes drifted lower and I saw the empty signature line with my name under it, waiting, ready, prepared for me, like they had made space for me to sign away everything without even understanding what I was signing. My knees weakened instantly. A trembling started in my legs, spreading upward until my whole body felt unsteady. I had to press my shoulder against the door to keep myself from falling. My son and his wife leaned over the document together. Their heads were close, their eyes focused on the paper, their hands brushing the edges of it like it was a map to something precious. And to them, it was. My money, my account, my security, all laid out on that table like something they already believed belonged to them. I watched as his wife traced the line where my signature was supposed to go. She wasn't confused, she wasn't asking questions. She knew exactly what she was looking at. She understood every part of it. And that hurt more than anything. The certainty, the readiness, the comfort she felt touching something that wasn't hers. My son pointed to another section on the form. I saw the words ownership rights and transfer immediately upon signing. The more I read from a distance, the more sick I felt. These weren't just simple changes. These were documents that would give them full control the moment I signed. Full access, full authority, full freedom to drain everything I had saved. The bank warning suddenly made perfect sense. Someone didn't just try to access my account, someone was preparing for it, preparing the paperwork, preparing the timing, preparing the explanation they would give me. And I realized something I didn't want to accept. They thought I would sign. They thought I was weak enough, confused enough, trusting enough. They thought they could smile, hand me a pen and say, "Just sign here, Mom," and I would do it. My hands shook harder. My breath grew thin and shallow. My son lifted the form again, his expression serious, focused, determined. He tapped the page lightly, as if rehearsing what he would say when he placed it in front of me later. As if he imagined convincing me easily. As if he believed I would never question him. I wanted to step forward and confront them. I wanted to shout. I wanted to ask how they could do this to me, but my voice was trapped inside my throat, locked behind fear and heartbreak. I wasn't ready to face them, not yet. So I stood there, hidden behind the door, my body trembling, my heart breaking, realizing that the paper on the table wasn't just a form. It was a plan, a trap, a way to take everything I owned with one simple signature, and they were preparing it with confidence, not knowing I was only a few steps away, watching the truth unfold. I stayed behind the door, gripping it so tightly my knuckles turned white. I felt like I was floating outside my own body, watching something I never imagined I would see. My son leaned closer to his wife, pointing at another part of the paperwork with deliberate calm, like someone who had rehearsed this moment again and again. His wife nodded slowly, her eyes bright in a way that made my stomach twist. She wasn't confused. She wasn't hesitant. She was helping. She was guiding him. She was part of every detail sitting on that table, and that truth alone made my hands shake even more. Then she whispered something, and even though her voice was soft, the words cut straight through me. She said, "When she comes home tonight, tell her it's just a routine bank update." Routine bank update. Those words repeated in my mind, sharp and painful. They were planning to lie directly to my face. They were planning to hand me that paper and make it sound harmless, simple, nothing more than regular paperwork. I felt something heavy sink inside me. The kind of weight that comes when trust breaks and your heart tries to catch up to the truth. My son nodded, as if the idea was completely reasonable. He didn't look guilty. He didn't look uncertain. He looked ready, determined. He tapped the signature line again, like he was already imagining my hand signing it. I watched his wife lift her teacup with a small smile. A smile. She wasn't ashamed. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't afraid. She was excited. Then she whispered, "She signs it, and we'll have full access by tomorrow morning." Full access. Tomorrow morning. Those words felt like a punch to the chest. I clutched the door even harder, my breath catching in my throat. They had planned everything down to the hour. They knew exactly what the bank needed. They knew exactly how quickly the changes would go through. They knew exactly how fast they would be able to touch my money, my life savings, my emergency funds, my security. All of it turned into a plan for their convenience. My son raised his teacup too, and they clinked their cups gently, quietly, as if celebrating something achieved, not something stolen. The soft sound of those cups meeting made my knees tremble. It wasn't loud, but it was enough to make something inside me break a little more. They were celebrating a future built on my signature, a future where they controlled everything I had, a future where I didn't matter. I stood there hidden, feeling each word carved deeper into me. The way they talked about me sounded cold, distant, practical, like I wasn't a person, like I was an obstacle they needed to get past. My mind flashed back to the bank again. Someone had tried to access my account. Someone had failed. And now they were sitting in my kitchen preparing a way to succeed, not through hacking, not through guessing, but through me, through my trust, through my signature. It was all connected. Every warning sign, every small moment I brushed off, every strange question they asked in the past. And now here they were, building a plan together, step by step, confident nothing would go wrong. Confident. I would never question them. I felt tears push against my eyes, but I blinked them back. Not wanting to make a sound? I kept my hand pressed over my mouth, trying to keep my breathing quiet. I didn't want them to hear me. I didn't want them to know I was home. Not yet. Not until I understood everything. I watched them lean over the paper again, whispering details, checking things, making sure every line was ready for me. They had no idea I was only a few feet away, watching their plan unfold piece by piece. That paper on the table was not a simple form. It was a trap, a stolen future waiting for my signature, and they were preparing it with smiles on their faces. My fingers slipped slightly on the edge of the door because they were trembling so much. I had to steady myself again, pressing my palm against the wood as quietly as I could. My knees felt weak, almost unable to hold me up. I could feel them shaking beneath me. Tiny tremors that wouldn't stop no matter how hard I tried to stay still. I stared at the scene before me, at the two people I trusted most sitting at my kitchen table planning something that felt like a punch straight into my heart. I wanted to speak. I wanted to burst into the room and ask them why they were doing this. But my voice was trapped inside me, locked behind shock so deep it left me unable to breathe properly. My chest tightened as the realization grew clearer. The attempt at the bank, the warning from the banker, the strange questions in the past, the worry I always brushed off because I didn't want to think something bad. It all suddenly fit together like pieces of a puzzle I never wanted to see. They were behind it. My own son. His wife. The two people I shared my home with, the two people I believed cared about me, the two people I trusted when I felt alone. Seeing them like this, whispering over papers meant to take everything from me, felt like the ground had opened beneath my feet. My hands shook harder. I pressed one against my stomach, trying to calm the twisting pain that was growing there. It felt like something was collapsing inside me, something I had held on to for years: trust, safety, a sense of belonging. It all started slipping away at once. I watched as my son tapped the paper again, as his wife smiled and pushed another form into place. Their movements were so calm, so comfortable, so confident. They looked like people planning a trip or organizing a birthday surprise. Except this wasn't a gift. It wasn't love. It wasn't care. It was betrayal. Carefully prepared, quietly planned, and almost carried out. I felt my throat tighten painfully, the kind of tightness that comes before crying, but I refused to let a sound escape. I covered my mouth with my hand to keep myself quiet, my breath trembling against my palm. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't even whisper. My heart felt heavy, too heavy, like it was sinking deeper into my chest with each second. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was heartbreak, a slow, deep heartbreak that spread through me like a cold wave. The banker's words echoed again in my mind. "Be careful at home." At home. He said it because he already sensed something was wrong, and now I saw what he meant. The people I lived with weren't protecting me. They were planning to strip me of everything. The attempt to access my account earlier wasn't random. It wasn't a mistake. It was the beginning of their plan. When they failed, they prepared another way. A signature. My signature. Thinking I wouldn't question it. Thinking I would trust them blindly. That thought hurt the most. That they believed I would sign without thinking. That they counted on my trust. That they saw my love as weakness they could use. I felt a tear slip down my cheek, but I wiped it quickly with the back of my hand. I didn't want to make any sound. I didn't want them to look up and see me. I didn't want them to know how deeply they had broken me. Not yet. The room seemed to spin slightly from the weight of everything. I tried to focus my eyes, but my vision blurred with tears that kept trying to fall. I forced myself to swallow the pain down, at least for the moment. I needed to stay quiet. I needed to stay hidden. I slowly backed up one small step, my breath shaking. I knew I couldn't stay behind the door forever. The more I listened, the more the cold truth sank in. If I didn't act, they would. If I didn't protect myself, no one else would. My knees trembled so hard I thought they might give out, but I held on to the wall, forcing myself to stay upright. I wasn't ready to confront them. I wasn't ready to speak. I wasn't ready to let them know I had heard everything. I needed to leave. I needed to think. I needed to find help. But as I stood there, swallowing the hurt and the fear, I knew one thing clearly. Nothing would ever be the same again. I stepped backward as quietly as I could, moving inch by inch so the floor wouldn't creak beneath me. My heart was pounding so hard I felt it in my throat. My hands were shaking too much to steady myself properly, and every breath I took felt thin and unsteady. I didn't want them to hear me. I didn't want them to see me. I needed to get out before they realized I had been standing there the whole time. Each step felt heavier than the last. My chest ached, my stomach twisted, and my legs barely held my weight. I reached the hallway, still moving slowly, pressing my hand against the wall to guide myself. I didn't dare look back at the kitchen. I didn't dare even breathe too loudly. I wanted to run, but I forced myself to move, carefully, quietly. When I made it to the front door, I stopped. My fingers hovered over the doorknob, terrified that even the smallest click might alert them. I held my breath, listening closely for any sign that they were walking toward me, but their voices stayed low and steady in the kitchen, still focused on the papers, still planning, still unaware. I turned the handle slowly, painfully slowly, making sure not to let the metal shift too fast. The door opened just enough for me to slip outside. I stepped onto the porch, closing the door behind me with the softest push I could manage. When it clicked into place, I felt my chest tighten even more. I didn't feel safe until I stepped off the porch completely. Once I reached the sidewalk, my legs gave a slight shake. I grabbed the railing of the steps to steady myself. The cold air hit my face, but it didn't calm me. It just made me realize how fast my heart was beating. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry, but I did neither. I just kept walking. My steps were unsteady, but I moved quickly, putting distance between myself and the house. I didn't look back even once. I couldn't. If I did, I might break down. Or worse. I might lose the small courage I had left. I kept walking, holding on to the fear just long enough to keep my feet moving. As I reached the corner of the street, a thought hit me hard. I couldn't go back to the bank. I needed someone who would listen, someone who could protect me, someone who would take this seriously. The bank had warned me, but what I saw at home confirmed everything. I needed help, real help. So I headed straight to the police station. My legs felt heavy, but I pushed myself forward. I kept replaying the scene in the kitchen, my son whispering, his wife smiling. The forms spread across the table, the signature line with my name on it. The betrayal made my stomach hurt. By the time I reached the station, my hands were shaking so badly that I struggled to push the door open. Inside, the officer at the front desk looked up immediately. Maybe he saw the fear on my face. Maybe he heard it in my uneven breathing. Either way, he stood quickly and asked what happened. I opened my bag with trembling fingers and pulled out the alert from the bank. My voice cracked when I tried to speak, but I forced myself to explain. The attempted access, the warning from the banker, the whispers I overheard, the documents I saw on the table. Every word felt heavy, but I spoke them anyway. The officer listened carefully. He didn't interrupt. He didn't rush me. His expression changed from concern to seriousness as I continued. When I finished, he nodded slowly and started writing everything down. He asked a few calm questions, and I answered as best as I could. When I told him the names of my son and his wife, he nodded again, more firmly this time. He assured me they would look into it immediately. He said what happened wasn't simple family trouble. It was potentially a financial crime. Hearing those words made my knees shake again, but in a different way. It felt like someone finally understood. The officer made a copy of the bank alert. He asked if I had a safe place to stay for the night. I nodded, telling him I would go to a neighbor's house. He encouraged it. He even walked me to the station door to make sure I was steady. As I stepped back outside, the fear was still there, but it was mixed with something else. A small, fragile sense of protection. Someone believed me. Someone was taking action. Someone was on my side. I started walking toward my neighbor's house, hugging my bag close. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know how my son would react. I didn't know how deep their plan went. But I knew one thing. I wasn't going home. Not tonight. Not until I felt safe again. And for the first time since hearing that whisper in the kitchen, I felt like I had done the right thing by walking away. I walked to my neighbor's house with slow steps, each one lighter than the one before, but the fear still sat heavy in my stomach. When I reached her door, she opened it before I even knocked all the way. Maybe she saw the worry on my face. Maybe she felt something was wrong. She pulled me inside gently, and I finally let myself breathe. Not deeply, not comfortably, but enough to feel the air reach my lungs again. I sat at her small kitchen table, my hands wrapped tightly around a warm cup of water she handed me. I couldn't drink it. My hands were too shaky to lift it to my mouth. She didn't ask questions right away. She just sat beside me, letting me gather myself. I didn't tell her the details, only that I needed a place to stay for the evening. She didn't hesitate. She nodded and told me I could stay as long as I needed. As I sat there, I felt my phone buzz in my bag. The sound made my heart jump. I reached for the phone slowly, dread filling every part of me. When I looked at the screen, my son's name appeared. A bright, cheerful text message. He asked when I would be home. He said he had some forms for me to sign later. Forms. Exactly the word they used in the kitchen. My stomach twisted painfully. 2 minutes later, he called. I didn't answer. He called again and again. 4 calls in a row, then a message from his wife popped up. Let us know when you're home. We need to talk. Talk. That was the exact word she whispered earlier when they rehearsed their plan. My hands tightened around my phone as I set it down on the table, screen facing downward so I wouldn't have to see their names anymore. I felt a wave of relief wash over me knowing I had gone to the police first, knowing I had told someone everything, knowing there was now a record of their behavior. The officer had taken notes seriously. He didn't treat me like I was confused or overreacting. He listened. He understood. He wrote every detail carefully. The fear still pulsed through me, but it was different now. It wasn't the helpless kind. It wasn't the kind that traps you. It was the kind that warns you to stay aware, to stay safe, to protect yourself. A little later, the officer called me. He told me the bank had already flagged my account and that no one, not even me, could make changes without a special code that only the bank manager could authorize in person. That eased some of the tightness in my chest. My account was safe. My savings were safe. My name could not be used anymore. After the call, I placed my phone on the table again and closed my eyes for moment, I felt exhausted, worn down by the emotions of the day. But beneath the exhaustion was a quiet strength, something I hadn't felt in a long time. My son called again that evening, 6 more times. Each time, the vibration of the phone felt like a reminder of what I had escaped. Each time I refused to answer. He left a voice message. I didn't listen to it. I couldn't listen to it, not when I already knew the tone he would use. Warm, soft, pretending to care, pretending nothing was wrong, pretending the forms were harmless, pretending the lie he had prepared earlier in the kitchen. I wasn't going to fall for it anymore. Not after what I saw. Not after what I heard. I stayed in my neighbor's home as the sky grew darker outside. The kitchen felt warm, safe, calm. My neighbor talked about simple things, gentle things, things that grounded me again. I nodded along, grateful for her presence. Eventually, I checked my phone one last time. My son had stopped calling. Maybe he was waiting. Maybe he was worrying. Maybe he was finally realizing I wasn't coming home, and I wasn't playing the role they expected. What he didn't know was that I had already taken the first step to protect myself. He didn't know the police had my statement. He didn't know the bank had locked my account. He didn't know his plan was already collapsing. I looked at my phone, at the silent screen, and for the first time since that awful moment in the hallway, I felt something steady inside me. They thought they had everything planned. They thought I would walk into their trap blindly. They thought I would sign without thinking, but now they were the ones waiting, and I was the one in control. I sat in my neighbor's kitchen long after the sun went down, holding a warm cup of tea between my hands. The warmth didn't take away the hurt, but it steadied me. I needed that. After everything I had seen in my own kitchen, I needed a place where my hands could stop trembling and my heart could slowly find its rhythm again. The quiet in her home felt gentle, not heavy, not secretive, not dangerous, just simple, safe. It made my mind settle in a way I didn't realize I needed. I breathed deeper than I had all day, letting the warmth from the tea reach the cold places inside my chest. My neighbor didn't ask questions I wasn't ready to answer. She just moved around the kitchen softly, giving me space, letting me sit with my thoughts. Every now and then she'd place a hand on my shoulder or refill my cup without saying a word. That small kindness meant more than she knew. My phone buzzed a few more times, but I didn't reach for it. I didn't want to read any messages. I didn't want to hear any explanations. I didn't want to listen to lies wrapped in fake concern, not after hearing the truth straight from their mouths. I let the phone buzz until it stopped, and when it finally fell silent, I felt something loosen around my heart. Silence had become a kind of protection for me now. A little while later, I received a call. Not from my son, but from the officer at the station. His voice was calm, steady. He told me they had already prepared a report and forwarded everything to the Financial Crimes Department. He told me my statement had been filed securely. He told me someone would follow up within the next day. He also said the bank had flagged my account permanently and that my son wouldn't be able to touch anything, not a dollar, not a cent. The protection was immediate, strong, unbreakable. Hearing that made me close my eyes in relief. Another small weight lifted from my shoulders. My neighbor watched me quietly as I hung up the phone. I told her it was the police, and she nodded understanding. She didn't need me to say more. She could see the exhaustion, the hurt, the slow return of strength. As I sat there, the truth settled clearly in my mind. Their plan was falling apart. Everything they prepared was useless now. Their timing was no longer perfect because I came home early. In that moment, sitting in a warm kitchen that wasn't mine, I realized how close I had been to losing everything. If I had come home at my usual time, if I hadn't listened at the door, if I had trusted their smiles, I might have signed away my entire life. Instead, I listened. I left quietly. I protected myself. And now justice was already moving in my favor. I took a slow breath and whispered softly to myself, letting the words settle deep. They thought I'd never know. They were wrong. Saying it out loud gave me strength I didn't know I still had. Strength that came from survival, strength that came from truth, strength that came from refusing to become the victim they thought I would be. My neighbor placed a small blanket around my shoulders, and I felt my body relax just a little more. I sipped the warm tea again, feeling its heat travel through me. My heart was still bruised but no longer collapsing. My trust was still shaken, but no longer blind. I wasn't home, but I was safe. My money was safe. My future was safe. And the people who tried to steal from me, the people who sat in my kitchen whispering and celebrating, would soon face the consequences of their own actions. The silence in the room grew deeper, more peaceful. I let myself rest in it. I let myself breathe. I let myself feel something I hadn't felt since the moment I came home early. Justice. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady, quiet, real. I wrapped my hands around the warm cup again and whispered one last time, almost like a promise to myself. They were wrong about me, and now they'll learn.